UFC 301, Pantoja versus Urseg, full card predictions. Starting at the bottom of the card, making my way to the top as always. First fight of the night, getting right into it. Alessandro Costa taking on Kevin Borjas. I'm going with Kevin Borjas here. Look, I know Costa's a good fighter. I'd say relatively well-rounded. However, Borjas I think is a better striker, and I think this fight will probably play out primarily on the feet. If anyone pushes the grappling, it'll obviously be Alessandro Costa. He is the better grappler of the two, in my opinion. However, Borjas has shown in his fight on the Contender Series. I watched that fight against Victor Diaz. He looked pretty good in that fight. I mean, as the rounds went on, he was starting to piece up Victor Diaz, land a lot of good punches on him, rocked him a little bit. Couldn't finish him, but Victor Diaz, even when he could take him down, he didn't get into any like super dominant positions, or like get any like submission attempts or anything like that on Kevin Borjas. And Victor Diaz is a black belt in his own right, so that's good news for Borjas, knowing that he can kind of defend against the grappling. In the fight against Josh Van, he actually dropped Van in round one, and then in round two and three, Van started to kind of walk him down and start landing on him. I don't think Costa is going to be able to do that. They're around the same age, 28 and 26. I know Costa has good training partners like Diego Lopez, among others, but I just think Kevin Borjas is the better striker, and I think if he keeps his fight on the feet, Borjas probably should win. And possibly, I don't know if we'll find the knockout, but we've seen Costa rock before, we've seen him drop before, and Borjas definitely has the ability to, hit hard. So we'll see what happens here. Costa, obviously, he lost to Steve Urseg, who's in the main event, and Amir Albazi. So not bad losses, but I mean, the loss to Amir Albazi took an uppercut and then got ground and pounded after. I just think Borjas has the striking ability to hurt Costa on the feet, and if he does, I think he can win this fight. Ismail Bonfim versus Vince Pichel. Pichel is 41 years old now to the 28-year-old Bonfim. I think that's a lot of what I need to say. Pichel's last fight was 2 years ago against Mark Madsen, a fight in which he lost. And they were actually supposed to fight before Pichel and Bonfim. However, Bonfim missed weight, and Pichel decided not to take the fight, which I get. Can't really blame him there. I mean, Bonfim agreed to make the weight, couldn't do it. So now they're fighting again, this time both men on weight. So the fight is going along this time. I just think Pichel at 41 against Bonfim, I think it's going to be a tough ask. Bonfim is a really good fighter, good striker especially. I know he lost the fight, but that was to Benoit Saint-Denis, and we've seen how good Benoit Saint-Denis is. Benoit had a good first round, really good first round against Poirier before he got knocked out. And overall, Benoit Saint-Denis is just a really like a top-level fighter in my opinion. So that loss, there's nothing to be ashamed of there. For Vince Pichel, though, I mean, he hasn't really, the last few years, he hasn't really been fighting like the greatest I mean, I know Mark Madsen's solid. Austin Hubbard just won, even though I thought he lost last weekend. Jim Miller, legend of the game, although Jim Miller is also an older guy as well. Bonfim, 28 years old, in his prime, coming off a loss to Benoit. Before that, he had a flying knee knockout over Terrence McKinney. Looked great in that fight and looked great on the Contender Series as well. I just think for Pichel, he's a tough guy. He's a durable guy, so I could see the fight going all three, but I don't think Pichel will be able to defeat a guy like Bonfim. I think Bonfim will be the quicker, the faster guy. I think he'll be able to land more damaging strikes, and I think that's what will make the difference here. So I'm going to go with Bonfim. The fight probably goes to decision, but I'll pick him to win overall. I didn't really do any tape on this fight, to be completely honest. Just wasn't interested in it. I'll pick Diani Barbosa, but not really much to say about that one, so I'm just going to move right along. Mauricio Ruffy versus Jamie Malarkey. I know this is, it should be like on paper, you look and you're like, Malarkey, he doesn't have a chin anymore. Ruffy's just going to knock him out. It's going to be easy. But I don't like Ruffy's game. I really don't. I mean, could he knock out Malarkey? Probably. He probably will, honestly, because Malarkey has no chin. But like, I don't know, man. I really don't like Ruffy's game. He was losing to Magomed Aliyev on the Contender Series. He lost the first two rounds clearly. In the third round, he picked it up and won. But I mean, it's not even like he knocked out Magomed Aliyev. So it's, what happened was he obviously, like I said, lost the first two rounds. Third round, Magomed Aliyev started gassing out, and he was starting to land good shots on Magomed Aliyev. Couldn't like knock him down or knock him out or anything, but Magomedov tried to drag him to the ground, basically dragged Ruffy right on top of him. Ruffy got into mount and just started, hammering away and ended up finishing the fight. The fight ended mainly just due to Magomedov just getting tired, getting gassed out, making a mistake in the grappling, and getting finished. Malarkey's not going to do that, right? Malarkey, if he does lose, he's going to lose by knockout. He's not going to lose by making a ton of mistakes as far as, you know, making a lot of like dumb grappling mistakes. I think Malarkey, he's a pretty solid fighter. It's just his chin is such a question mark. It's such a concern. But is Jamie Malarkey's chin that bad that Mauricio Ruffy deserves to be minus 220? It's a market overcorrection, in my opinion, just because Raymond Magomedov was like a minus 300 or minus 250, whatever, and Ruffy was like a plus 200, and now he went from a plus 200 to a minus 220 in one fight. I think Malarkey's UFC caliber. I mean, maybe his chin's not, but everything else is. He got knocked out by Nazar Haqparast, knocked out by Muhammad Naimov. Not a great loss there, I get it. But I mean, he won a split against Michael Johnson, competitive fight, beat Francisco Prado, beat John McDessie. So it's like he's become a worthy, finished him, finished Devontae Smith. So it's like Jimmy Malarkey has UFC caliber wins. It's not like Jamie Malarkey is just getting like beaten up in every single fight. I know he's gotten dropped in a lot of fights, but the guy's, he's a solid fighter. He really is. And Ruffy just hasn't really proven anything to me so far. So I'm gonna very, very reluctantly pick Malarkey. I get it. If he gets knocked out, it's gonna look stupid, but I just can't. I can't pick a guy who, if you look at the level of competition in his last few, I mean, Magomed Aliyev was winning the fight until he got tired. He should have won that fight. If he didn't get tired, he would have won the fight, and we wouldn't even have this fight. Jimmy Larkin and Ruffy would not be fighting if Magomed Aliyev didn't get tired, right? So if he didn't get tired, this fight wouldn't be happening because he would have won. And then the fight before that, he's beaten, just regional guys that aren't that good. And now you're fighting Malarkey. Like I said, reluctantly, I'll pick Malarkey. I don't love it. What I think will happen probably is, Malarkey, I have to pick him just because he's a plus 180, and I think he has a better than plus 180 chance of winning this fight. But if Ruffy does win by knockout, it also wouldn't surprise me just because Ruffy does have some power and Malarkey is chinny. So just keep that in mind. But for pick's sake, I'll roll with Malarkey on this one. Next up is Joaquim Silva versus Drakkar Klose. This is one where I'm going to go with Drakkar Klose. I don't think Joaquim Silva has performed that well against southpaws in the UFC. I know he did against Jesse Ronson. He beat him, but Jesse Ronson is not even close to UFC caliber whatsoever. The fight against Clay Guida's a good fighter, but he's a little bit older now. He's like 41, and the fight was a lot closer than it should have been. I think Silva should have looked. I mean, I don't think he looked that great against Clay Guida, and that was 5 months ago. Guida did have some solid moments there. Silva won the fight, but like it wasn't like a domination. It was fairly competitive. The fact that it was so competitive makes me a little bit worried. Now that he's fighting a guy in Drakkar Klose who I think is has more to give at this point in his career, more to give than Clay Guida. Fight before that, lost to Arman Tsarukyan. I know people are going to say, "Oh, he rocked Arman in the second round." Yeah, he rocked Arman, but outside of that, I mean, he was getting dominated. He lost the fight clearly. He rocked him, but I mean, that's the only highlight he had. Like I said, beat Jesse Ronson. Not really super impressive. I don't think Ronson's UFC caliber. And then lost to Ricky Glenn and Nasrat Haqparast, both by knockout. The Nasrat Haqparast loss, I'm not going to hold too much against him, but the Ricky Glenn fight, it was a first round knockout. It's just bad. It's just a terrible look getting finished by Ricky Glenn like that. Ricky Glenn is just not a guy that you should be getting knocked out by, and especially when you're fighting Drakkar Klose, a guy who does have a little bit of explosive ability. He's not known for knocking a ton of guys out, even though he did obviously slam KO Joe Solecki. He did go to a lot of decisions. Rafa Garcia, Christos Yagos, Bobby Green, Lando Venata. Most of his fights do go the distance in the UFC, but I think Drakkar Klose probably has better durability. His one loss by knockout was against Beneil Dariush, and that was a fight where he rocked Dariush. And instead of, trying to stay composed, he just went after Dariush and ended up getting, knocked out himself. But I just don't think that's going to happen here. I think he'll be smart enough. I think he learned his lesson enough. And he's on a 3-fight win streak over Brandon Jenkins, Rafa Garcia, Joe Solecki. I think the win streak continues. I think the fight could play out relatively close, no pun intended, but I will pick Drakkar to get it done by decision. I think if anyone finds the finish here, if either of these guys knock each other out, I think Close will knock out Silva. But my official pick will be Drakkar Close wins by decision. Next up, we have Elvis Brenner versus Miktabik Oralbai. I'm going to pick Oralbai, even though the line is a little bit, it's getting a little bit wide at this point, in my opinion. Minus 250, I've seen minus 300. I think Oralbai should win this fight just in terms of his wrestling abilities, but Elvis Brenner's a dog, man. You can't. I'm not betting Oralbai in this spot, and I wouldn't recommend people like lay minus 250, minus 300 on a guy who is relatively unproven in the UFC. Oralbai I think he is a very good fighter, but it's just, he had one fight in the UFC. It was a short notice fight up a weight class against Medic, who he beat very dominantly. However, Uros Medic is not a grappler. He's not a wrestler. So you can take that for what it's worth. I still think it's a good win because he came in on like 4 or 5, whatever, I think it was 4 or 5 days notice and beat Uros Medic. So I still think it's a good win. But Elvis Brenner is a much better wrestler and grappler than a guy like Uros Medic. With that being said, I have seen Elvis Brenner get taken down in fights before. If you look through his record, the 2 fights I've seen of him getting taken down, Gabriel Santos took him down a few times, and Sergey Andreev, both on the regional scene. And neither of those guys completely dominated him on the mat, but they did have some control time. They did rack up some takedowns. And I think if those 2 guys I know it was a few years ago. I know it was like back in 2020 and stuff like that. So Elvis Brenner has improved quite a bit, but also Miktabik Oralbai has also improved a lot over the years. They're the same age, 26 years old. I just think Oralbai will be able to get the takedowns here. I think he'll be able to get the takedowns, get some control time, probably land some decent ground and pound. I think he has better cardio, if I had to say, out of the 2. I've seen, not that Brenner has bad cardio. Brenner is a dog, as I mentioned. He will come forward. Like, he's not going to quit on himself. Look at the Guram Kutadladze fight. In the Guram fight, Elvis Brenner was losing. He lost the first and the second. In round 3, he came back, won the fight. Even though their second round was like pure domination. From what I saw in that fight, he got split open. He was bleeding all over. Guram had a lot of good moments in that second round, and then Brenner came back and won. So it's hard to pick against Brenner in that aspect just because you never know. He could always come back. But against Miktabik Oralbai, I know Oralbai can push a wrestling pace for 3 rounds. Even if he gets tired, I think even if both guys get tired, Oralbai can still try to wrestle here. I think the striking is fairly even. I wouldn't say Brenner has a really strong edge in the striking. Oralbai is training with guys like Slava Claus over at Alpha Male, so I think his striking is improving. I think his wrestling is already good. So I'm going to pick Oralbai here. Again, minus 250. I don't love the price tag on it. I think it should be a little bit closer just to give the respect to Brenner because Brenner does deserve respect. Training out of Shoot the Box Diego Lima, which is a very good gym. I saw on his Instagram he's getting training. Some of his training partners include obviously Dubronx, Charles Oliveira, Ian Gary. He's been training with Damian Maya. So he's been training with elite people, elite training partners, getting him ready for these fights. But Oralbai's been getting some good training partners in his own right over at Team Alpha Male. He's been getting good striking in. Obviously, his wrestling is very good. I saw him he's been at Tiger Muay Thai, for the past few months as well. So training at Tiger Muay Thai as well as Team Alpha Male, getting a good mix of striking and wrestling. I think that'll help him out here. I will pick Miktabik Oralbai to win. I'll say by decision. I think it will be a fairly competitive fight. I don't think Oralbai will be able to finish Brenner just because Brenner is very tough, but I do think Oralbai will be able to get the takedowns, and I'll say win a 30-27, maybe 29-28 decision. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Yasmin Lucindo. I'm going with Yasmin Lucindo. She's a heavy favorite, mainly just because of the age. 22-year-old Lucindo versus 38-year-old Karolina Kowalkiewicz. There's so much more for Lucindo to improve. At 22 years old, she can make massive improvements from fight to fight. That's something I look at. People that can make massive improvements, massive leaps each time they get in the cage and fight. Lucindo can do that, absolutely. because of how young she is, because of how much time she has left in the sport. Whereas Karolina Kowalkiewicz, I feel like she's on her last legs here. Not that she's like completely slowing down because she is on a win streak, but like I said, she's 38 years old. She's not getting any younger. I don't really love either woman. Honestly, the strength of schedule in the last few for Lucindo isn't terrible. Polyana Viana's okay, I guess. Brogan Walker, maybe that's not, Brogan Walker's Brogan Walker, but that was up at 125. This fight's at 115. Um, and then she lost a competitive fight to Yasmin Yarogli. For Karolina Kowalkiewicz, her last 4 wins have been against Felice Herrig, Silvana Gomez Juarez, Vanessa Demopoulos, and Diana Belbita. I think this is a step up for Carolina. This is also in Brazil. Obviously, the card is in Brazil, so it'll be a home fight for Yasmin Lucindo here. And I just think Lucindo, also the grappling, Karolina Kowalkiewicz did get taken down by Diana Belbita, and Belbita did let her up right away. In the first round, she did get a body lock. It was more of a head and arm throw takedown, and she got on top of Carolina, but she just let her right back up. I think Lucindo could probably get a body lock takedown. I've seen her get takedowns. In a fight against Polyana Viana, she got a body lock takedown. I think she can do the same against Kowalkiewicz. So I think she can work the grappling if she wants. I think her striking, definitely in terms of power and in terms of landing the better shots, I think the better shots will be landed by Lucindo as well. So I'm going to pick her to win. Headliner of the prelims, we have Jack Tank Shore versus Joanderson Brito. I'm going with Joanderson Brito here. Look, I was kind of looking, 50-50 on the fight at first, but then I looked at the Ricky Simone fight and I was like, if Ricky Simone can land a right hand that rocks Shore badly, had him stumbling all over, I think Brito can do the same thing. And I think Brito hits harder. I think he hits way harder. I think if you get hit by this guy's, look at the way he's built. You get hit by this guy, you're getting hurt badly, if not knocked out. I mean, he knocked out Andre Fili, like, in the first round. Brito's just one of those guys where you just don't want to get hit by him. So I do think Jack Shore will push a grappling, a wrestling heavy game plan. I think that's probably his best path to victory. I don't think it would be smart for him to try to hang out on the feet with a guy like Brito, who does have massive power, especially knowing that Shore, can get rocked and can get hurt by a guy like Ricky Simone, who is, obviously not the same caliber of striker that Brito is, at least in terms of the power. The fight after that, for sure, though, was against Makwan Amirkhani. Didn't even like the look against Makwan. That was his first fight at 45. That's another thing I want to mention about this fight. Shore was a bantamweight, and now he's fighting at featherweight. So he was 135er. Now he's up at 145. I don't like that for him. I don't think Shore is built to be a 45er. I think Brito absolutely is built to be a 45er. Just look at the guy. He's like jacked completely. Whereas Shore, I think, is a little bit soft. Not soft in terms of like, obviously he's a tough guy, but I mean, soft in terms of like the body composition. I don't think he's going to be able to take the shots from Brito very well. I think the physicality, I think the strength is completely on the side of Brito here. The one thing that Shore has that could give Brito problems is the grappling. Shore's grappling is good. However, the first round against Makwan Amirkhani, maybe it was just a tactic, knowing Shore probably knew that Makwan gasses out in every single fight, which is probably why he was okay with losing round one. But still, giving up round one to Makwan Amirkhani is just not a good look, in my opinion. Makwan Amirkhani out of the UFC now, and I'm pretty sure he lost his last fight in Octagon, if I'm not mistaken. Makwan Amirkhani has not been doing too hot recently. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. But actually, he lost, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 8 fights. So he's 2-6 in his last 8 for Amirkhani. So I don't think that win has aged very well at all. The fights before that, Timur Valiev, Ludovic Shalinian, and Hunter Azure by split. I just think the level of competition has been all on Brito's side. I understand Lucas Alexander and Weston Wilson are not super high caliber guys, but Jonathan Pierce is a good fighter. Andre Fili is a very solid fighter. He's right up there, like in borderline ranked. And then Bill Algeo. Bill Algeo is a guy who I rate pretty highly, despite his loss in his last fight. I think Bill Algeo is pretty good. And he also beat Chepe Mariscal in the first round, knocked him out. And The last fight that I want to talk about is Diego Lopez. The fact that he beat Diego Lopez is a huge feather in the cap of Brito. Brito had a ton of control time. I think he had like 7 minutes and like 45 seconds of control time against Diego Lopez in their fight. And we know how good Diego Lopez is now. Diego Lopez, super close fight with Movsar Evloev. Diego Lopez also had a great fight against Sodiq Yusuff in his last one, beat Sabatini, Gavin Tucker. So we know Diego Lopez is a really good fighter. And the fact that Brito beat him is very impressive to me. I think Jack Shore, I think after this fight, whatever happens, I think he should just drop back down to 135. I just think he's not a 45er. I think this fight will prove it. I'm going with Joanderson Brito. Kicking off the main card of the evening, we have Paul Craig versus Caio Borralho. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I hate Paul Craig's game. And it's not that, like, I like his grappling. I like Craig's grappling. I just don't like the overall MMA game. And it's because if you look at what Craig does, a lot of times when he doesn't, someone needs to push the grappling, needs to push the wrestling for him to have any success in a lot of fights. Paul Craig is kind of on the feet. I think he's a sitting duck. I know Borralho is not a guy that's, if you look through a lot of his fights, he's won a lot of them by decision. He hasn't really knocked out a ton of guys, but I think his striking is actually pretty good. He's also the younger guy, 31 to 36. Craig at 185 again. I don't know if how good it's going to do on his chin. I know he lost to Brendan Allen. He got dominated against Brendan Allen. I think Caio Borralho is similar in terms of the grappling. I think he's a similar level of grappler to Brendan Allen. I think Borralho is honestly better everywhere than Paul Craig. Craig has a submission. He has a triangle or an armbar. Like, he has that threat. But outside of that, if Borralho loses this fight, it would be a terrible, terrible look, in my opinion. You look through Craig's last few fights, submitted Nikita Krylov. I know he has some great submission wins, all right? He submitted Magomed Ankalaev. We all remember the Jamal Hill fight where he broke his arm. Nikita Krylov submitted him, beat Andre Muniz. So, like, the guy can grapple, all right? The guy can grapple. But I just think Caio Borralho can also grapple extremely well. I think he can grapple extremely well. I think his striking is way better. I think it's not even close. I think the striking of Borralho, kind of the karate type of in and out movement, will give Craig problems. I think Craig is a very I don't even know how to even describe his striking besides just bad. It's just very low level striking, in my opinion. Johnny Walker knocked out Paul Craig in their fight in like a minute. Lost to Volkan Ozdemir as well. So overall, I think Borralho should win this fight. I think he's better everywhere. I think the line is justified. If you're going to bet Paul Craig, he always has a submission opportunity. So maybe he wins by sub if he wins, but I have a hard time seeing it. I'm going with Caio Borralho to get it done. Michel Pereira versus Ihor Potieria. The line is just so wide, honestly. I'm going to pick Michel Pereira just because I like his game. Some people don't. I've heard some people that said they hate his game. I personally like his game. I just think he's improved, I think, quite a bit. 30 years old to the about to be 28-year-old Ihor Potieria. I just don't really rate Ihor super highly. If you look at Ihor's last few fights, he beat Robert Brycecheck by decision. I mean, everyone remembers the nut shot in that, or kicked him in the nuts, and then ended up winning the fight right after that moment. But Rodolfo Bellato was the fight where he almost won. Rodolfo Bellato fight was he almost had him out of there, but Bellato came back and ended up finishing him, which just shows Ihor Potieria, you can't really trust the guy. Lost to Carlos Ulberg in the first 2 minutes of their fight. Beat a retiring Shogun in the first round. I mean, Shogun, he was 41 and it was his last fight, and he was 1 foot out the door. You could tell Shogun was 1 foot out the door. He came in out of shape, came in looking like like an old man, and he got finished. And then Nikolai Negumereanu finished Ihor Potieria in round 2. So that rounds out his UFC career. And so he's 2-3 in the UFC. And if you look on the other side, Michel Pereira, he did fight at 170. Now he's up at 185. Now the flip side is Potieria. Potieria was a 205er. He was a light heavyweight. Now he's down at 185. So Potiera cutting more weight, whereas Michel Pereira, this is, I believe, his third fight in the UFC. I think it's his third fight in the UFC at middleweight, because he was a welterweight and had relatively good success there. I mean, Santiago Ponzinibbio was his best win. That was a split decision, but I mean, that was a very competitive fight. I think Santiago Ponzinibbio is better than Ihor. Outside of that win, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk submitted him in a minute, beat Andre Petrosky in a minute, beat Andre Fiallo, Nico Price, Chaos Williams, Salim Imadaev. Um, and if you look through more fights, the Tristan Connolly fight wasn't a good look at all. Tristan Connolly fight was actually a terrible look, but outside of that, I mean, he didn't really have a lot of other like really bad looks in the UFC. Whereas Poteria, I can't really trust him very much. I think Pereira should have the grappling edge for sure. I mean, Pereira is a black belt, so I don't think Ihor has the grappling edge. In terms of the striking, I also think Pereira is a guy that, he typically skirts around on the outside, or he likes to kind of pick his shots, skirt around the outside, pick his shots, and he does do that pretty well. I think he can do that to Ihor. He looked great in his last fight. I don't think he's going to look as good here against a Brazilian in Brazil and Michel Pereira, who's won a lot of fights in a row. Huge win streak, heavy favorite. Should he be minus 700? I mean, minus 700 is like way, way, way wide. Plus 475 on Poteria. I'm picking Michel Pereira, but minus 700 is unplayable. It's unplayable at that point. But I think he does get it done. Oh, man. Featured fight. Anthony Smith versus Vitor Petrino. I'm done with Anthony Smith, man. I'm done with him. I'm just tired of, like, I Anthony Smith, I don't even know what to say. Like, he can grapple. He's actually not a bad grappler, but it's just I just don't trust him to even grapple here. I think Vitor Petrino's Anthony Smith will probably think, oh, I'm gonna knock out Petrino and go on a run and get to the belt. Like he says, he's talking about fighting Pereira. I'm like, I don't know what he's possibly thinking. I don't understand his mindset right now. I don't understand if it's like what's going on with him constantly saying how he can beat Pereira and he thinks it would be a competitive fight. It's like, no, it wouldn't be. I think Vitor Petrino just ends the delusions. No disrespect to Anthony Smith. I just think Vitor Petrino just um, lets Anthony Smith know that, it's over for him at this point. You know what I mean? Smith, I get it. Smith has fought the much better level of competition. The level of competition is way on the Anthony Smith side. But if you look, he's 35, about to be 36. He's taken so much damage in his career, taken so much damage, fighting a guy in Vitor Petrino who can crack, who has a ton of power. The guy's got a ton of power. And you also look at the way this guy's built. You could tell he's on a cocktail of PEDs. I think it's pretty clear. So I do think Vitor Petrino, and not only can he hit really hard, he's just very strong as well. He's not the most like technical fighter, and he's not either in the grappling or in the striking. He's not the most technical whatsoever. But I don't even think the technical abilities matter in this fight. I think what matters is just Vitor just being the younger, hungrier guy, younger, like the guy that doesn't have a lot of miles, on him. Less miles, hasn't taken a lot of damage. A guy that's, a fresh up and coming guy who honestly could be the future of the division. We'll see how it goes, but Vitor, he just looks like one of those guys that you don't want to pick against. His last few fights as well, he beat Tyson Pedro. And Tyson Pedro is a black belt. Tyson Pedro submitted Paul Craig, for those that don't know. Just throwing that out there. A little fun fact if you didn't know that. He beat Modestas Bukauskas, knocked him out. So the level of competition, I get it. Level of competition completely on the Anthony Smith side. So minus 575, it's unplayable. Just like the last fight, minus 570, minus 700. They're unplayable lines, but I just can't see Anthony Smith getting it done. If he does get it, how does he win this fight against Petrino? Does he out-grapple him? I mean, he didn't try to grapple Roundtree. That was stupid. I mean, we've seen Roundtree get out-grappled before. I don't know why you wouldn't at least try to wrestle him. Anthony Smith decided to strike with him. He thought he could strike with him, and obviously he was wrong. Roundtree beat him up badly and finished him. The fight before that, Ryan Spann, we saw Ryan Spann's fight IQ was negative, and he almost had Smith out of there. So Spann almost had him out of there. Roundtree did finish the fight there. Lost to Johnny Walker by decision. That was the fight where he was like, he said something. What did Anthony Smith? Did he say something about like you're hurting my family? Or he said something weird. It's like he said one of the weirdest things I've heard in an octagon. Then he lost to Magomedov Goliath before that. Just overall, I mean, I know Anthony Smith's been fighting good competition, but I don't know, man. I don't trust him against a guy like Vitor Petrino at this point. 11-0 Vitor. The fight against Anton Turkalj was not a great look, but I do think Vitor is improving from fight to fight. I think he's got a lot more to give than Anthony Smith, and I just can't pick Anthony Smith. You know what? You know what'll happen? I'll pick Vitor Petrino, and then Anthony Smith will go out there and finally get a win, and I'll just look stupid. But I do think Vitor should definitely get this one done if he is going to be the future of the division. Co-main event of the evening, we have Jonathan Martinez versus Jose Aldo, the return of the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, fighting in his hometown. I gotta pick him. I gotta pick Aldo here. I mean, look, there's a few reasons of picking Aldo. One, Martinez. Let's look through Martinez's record. His last five, or was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? So he's won 6 in a row, right? And even before that, he won a few fights. Obviously, he lost a split to Andre Sukumtosh, and then got knocked out by David Grant back in 2021. With that being said, you look through his 6 wins. Adrian Yanez is a boxer. Couldn't check a leg kick, and we know Aldo will check those kicks, but he beat Adrian Yanez. Like I said, Adrian Yanez is a boxer, and he got the better of him. It was a solid win, but Yanez is nowhere near the level of Aldo on the feet overall, especially. Said Nurmagomedov, that was a razor close fight. Some people argued Said deserved the win. Super competitive fight, though. Super competitive fight in which Said Nurmagomedov was actually, I think he was a minus 200 favorite against Martinez, and Martinez was a minus like 115 against Adrian Yanez, and now he's a heavy like a minus 180 or minus 160 against Aldo. We'll see. Cub Swanson beat him with leg kicks, beat Vince Morales, Alejandro Perez. Like, I mean, now I'll the level of competition. That's not the reason I'm picking Aldo, even though you can say Aldo has fought a much higher level of competition clearly throughout his entire career. But it's not just the level of competition. That's not the reason I'm picking Aldo. I know he's older, 37 to 30. He's, hasn't fought in a year and 8 months. The last fight was against Merab. Like, I get it. Long layoff. He retired. Now he's coming back. Like, it's on paper, it's a recipe for disaster. But that would be if it wasn't in Rio. That would be if it wasn't a guy that in Jose Aldo that can check leg kicks like no one else. He is an elite striker, one of the best strikers we've seen in MMA history. I mean, the guy, he can not only can he check leg kicks, he can throw his own leg kicks. His boxing is way better than Martinez. I don't think it's even close. I think and he, by the way, it's not like Aldo didn't train. It's not like Aldo just, was like, oh, I'm just going to go on vacation and just do nothing for the next, year after I finish fighting. Like, he finished, he had his fight against Merab, and then he boxed 3 times. You know what I mean? He had 3 boxing fights. So it's not like he's just not fighting at all. Like, the guy's still getting in there. He's still competing in a different martial art. So it's like he's still training. He's still getting better in different aspects of MMA, even if it's in, just boxing rather than pure MMA. But I just think the boxing of Aldo is better than Martinez. I really don't think he'll have a ton of success with leg kicks because Aldo will be able to check them. And Martinez, you know what I could see this fight looking like? I could see this fight looking similar to the Chris Gutierrez and Pedro Munoz fight. I could see it looking similar to that fight where maybe early on in the fight, Gutierrez is starting to have some success. And then what happens is Munoz landed a good shot on Munoz dropped him. Munoz landed a few good punches on Chris Gutierrez, who is Martinez's teammate. I know I'm speaking of a different fight, but just hear me out. Hear me out what I'm going to say here. The fight with Gutierrez and Munoz. Munoz, crafty veteran against Gutierrez, who was on the way up. And Munoz beat Gutierrez just by, Gutierrez, he didn't like the power coming back at him from Pedro Munoz. He didn't like, and Pedro Munoz was also able to outgrapple Gutierrez. I think this is a similar case. I think it's a case of Martinez could get in there. He could throw some leg kicks. Maybe he'll look okay early. But Jose Aldo is just the type of guy that I don't think he'll be able to dominate a guy like Aldo for 3 rounds. I just think Aldo's too well rounded. I think he's fought such good guys. I think he's better outside of the leg kicks, outside of just the kicks of Martinez. I think Aldo's probably better everywhere. The only concern I have with Aldo here is just the layoff, really. The fact that he retired and he's been gone for a while. People are saying, I know some people are saying, is he taking this fight for a paycheck? I don't think so. I mean, yeah, he's fighting in Rio. You know what I mean? I think he knows better than to just take a fight in Rio for a paycheck. You know what I mean? It's in his hometown. It's in his hometown in front of his fans, his people. I think he's gonna go in there super motivated, and I think he really wants to win this fight. I think he's gonna do whatever it takes to win this fight. I'm going with Jose Aldo. Also, it's a bit of an emotional pick as well. Obviously, everyone loves Aldo, so a bit of an emotional pick as well. But I do think Aldo gets this one done. And lastly, the main event of the evening, we have Alexandre Pantoja taking on Steve Erceg. I get why people like Pantoja, and I get why people like Erceg here. I think this fight's actually going to be more competitive than a lot of people think. I feel like a lot of people that are picking Pantoja think he's just going to run through Erceg and it's not going to be competitive. And the people picking Erceg think that Erceg's going to probably stuff some takedowns and maybe land some, good shots on the feet and possibly hurt Pantoja and finish him. I think it could be a mix of both, honestly. I think Pantoja can get the grappling going, and I think Erceg can have some success on the feet. I think this can be a very competitive fight. This could go all 5 rounds. This could be an all-time classic fight. This could be a fight where both guys come out and look amazing. Erceg rises to the level of competition because obviously Erceg has not fought anywhere near the level of competition to Pantoja. Pantoja is a massive, let me say that again, a massive step up for Steve Erceg. This is going from Matt Snell, Costa, and David Dvorak to Pantoja. This is one of the biggest steps up, one of the biggest step ups I've seen in a long, long time. This is a massive, massive step up for Erceg. But Erceg doesn't seem like the type of guy that's just going to cower away and I don't think the moment's going to get to him. People have been saying that all week. Oh, the moment's going to get to Erceg. He's going to fold. I mean, could he get submitted? Absolutely. Pantoja is the better grappler. Pantoja's a better grappler. He's fought the better competition. He is more experienced in 5-round fights for sure because Erceg hasn't had a 5-round fight in the UFC. So all of those advantages go to Pantoja. But I do think Erceg is very good on the feet. I think the advantages that Pantoja has, I just mentioned, right? Now, here are the advantages that Erceg has. I think he has a very good fight IQ. I think he has good patience. I think he picks his shots well. I think his boxing is very crisp, very clean. I think his overall game is very technical. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I think all those things benefit Erceg. I just think he's a guy that he knows what he has to do here. He knows. And by the way, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Erceg shoots takedowns offensively too. I know people are going to think I'm crazy for saying that. I think Erceg will shoot takedowns offensively. If we, out of the fights that Pantoja lost, people shot takedowns on him. So I feel like if Erceg mixes it up a little bit, now do I think Erceg is going to get those takedowns? Probably not. But if you mix them up, if you do, try to mix in the wrestling and give him another, factor, give him another thing to look at, you never know what can happen. Now, we know what Pantoja is going to do. Pantoja is going to look to get the back and look to submit Steve Erceg or at least control him, right? Look to get the body triangle, and he is very good at that. He's done that over and over throughout his career. He submitted, He submitted Alex Perez in a minute, submitted Brandon Royval, beat Manal Kopp. Won a split against Moreno, even though it really shouldn't have been a split. I mean, he won that fight. And then beat Brandon Royval. So he's out-grappled a ton of guys. He's looked amazing as of recent. But I just think the fight is more competitive than just, oh, Pantoja is going to run through and make it look easy. I think a guy like Urseg, he knows what he has to do here. He knows he's in for he knows it's going to be a tough fight. Honestly, I think the fight is more, I would say it's probably 60-40 to Pantoja on paper. On paper, I'm picking Pantoja, but I think this is a case of like, it doesn't add up as much because MMA math, you look at things and you're like, Pantoja, better competition, better grappling. He's got this, he's got that. Like, I get it. But I just think Urseg's going to make the fight competitive more than people think. As far as a pure pick, mm, you know what? I'm gonna go Urseg. I mean, I'm gonna go Urseg. I've been thinking about this all week. I don't like that the line's been dropping. I was hoping that more people would bet Pantoja, so I would be one of the only ones on Urseg. That's what I was hoping. I was hoping to be on an island by myself. Because typically when most people are on the opposite side, I like to go like the Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman fight, the Sean O'Malley and Aljo fight. Those were a few of the fights that I was on. I was basically on an island, but here, a lot of people are on Urseg, which I don't like. I like kind of being on the island by myself, but I think he's got a shot here. I think he's got a better shot than a lot of people are giving him credit for, and I think this is going to be a really interesting fight. So I'll go Urseg just for the sake of it. If Pantoja wins, don't get me wrong, he has every opportunity to submit Urseg just because he is a very, very elite grappler, very good fighter overall. Even his striking is good. So when I say like Urseg, like I think Urseg is a better technical striker, but I do think Pantoja has the power and does have just the ability to just make things kind of wild, have kind of like a barn burner, crazy type of fight. So if that happens, we'll see. But I can't wait for this fight. I think this is gonna be a great one. So those are my picks for UFC 301 Pantoja versus Urseg. A lot of good fights on this card. I know some people aren't really a huge fan of this pay-per-view, but I actually kind of like it. I mean, especially the main card. Craig Barallo, that should be interesting. Even on the prelims, Brito Shore is a good fight. Brenner and Oralby should be an incredible fight. And then you look up the card, main event, co-main event, return of Jose Aldo, that's incredible. And then the main event fight, I think the main event will be one for the ages personally. So those are my picks, UFC 301. Thank you guys very much for watching. And as always, I will see you in the next one.